back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Garden Radio Show with your hosts, Julie and Holly Baird.
It is the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show on 860 AM WNOV and W293CX 106.5. So glad you've decided to join us on this Saturday morning here live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener is your the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com is your destination for all things gardening. 970 plus videos, digital magazines, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all of that goodness, and a whole lot more fun there. Grows. What is powdery mildew, first of all?
So powdery mildew is a fungal disease, and it typically affects your vine crops like your squash and
watermelons,
beans.
Zucchinis. Beans
not as much, but it can affect your beans.
And powdery mildew, we as gardeners, as vegetable gardeners, think of that. It affects many different species of vegetation, from trees to flowers to vegetables. So it's when we reference the powdery mildew on your squashes and your melons and all of that, that's what we are known. That's what we know about. That's what we're talking about. Vegetables. We're not going to talk about your tree or your flower that has the powdery mildew on it.
Right. So what happens is that because of that powdery mildew. Now, if you have a mild case of it, it's okay. It's typically not going to be a problem. But if it looks really thick, what's going to happen is it chokes out the plants from getting to perform their duty of chlorophyll, so they don't get enough sunlight to their leaves, so they cannot process correctly.
Some people say it doesn't affect them. We've always seen a dramatic change whenever the plant gets the powdery mildew on it versus when it doesn't have powdery mildew. So on a tree that is a very mature tree, if you have some form of powdery mildew, your tree is not going to die. It's got enough life in it, enough other leaves in which it can photosynthesize. If you're talking a butternut squash, a spaghetti squash, a zucchini, for example, they only have maybe 12 or 20 leaf structures. So when 90% of those get covered, it's kind of hard for that plant to produce photosynthesis or absorb the sunlight. So what does it look like, first of all?
So it looks like a powdery substance on your leaves of your plants.
Yeah, it looks like somebody sprinkled powder on the leaves of your plants. More of a dingy off-white powder.
Right, and so when you have a lot of humidity or a lot of rain, and you have warm evening temperatures, warm night temperatures, it doesn't allow your plants to dry off completely.
Now, sometimes you can't have any control on this.
Right. Oh yeah. No, not at all.
It's not like you're doing something wrong 99% of the time. You're not. This is just how it happens. This is how it works. This is how mildew forms with that dampness that it's not allowed to dry off on the leaves. One of the contributing factors can be if you're above ground watering before it gets dark. That can really lead to a lot of problems as well.
So that's something to keep in mind. And you can put the plants further apart. That's one way to prevent this in the future. If you have only one plant with the powdery mildew, it might not hurt just to yank that plant out and move on with your life. You
need to be vigilant. You need to keep your eye on it, because if you see powdery mildew forming on two leaf structures or two leaves, go ahead and remove those. Cut those straight off from the base of the plant, like for example, zucchini, or the stalk if it's a pumpkin or watermelon or whatever, and remove those, throw them away, because this can spread. This can spread from leaf to leaf, and if you're touching infected leaves, you can actually carry those spores of mildew over to uninfected leaves and actually infect the rest of your plant. So you need to be careful with that. But you can remove about 20%, 25% of the leaves if you have a lot of them affected.
Right.
Now, we usually get this late September, early October, where you only have about 30 days left of the grow season, and it's inevitable. You know you're going to have frost. The plant's going to die, so you just kind of let the plant do its own thing. But if sometimes you get it early, you can control it. And let's talk about some of the means in which preactive and reactive to the procedure of, okay, I have it or I might have it, so I want to try to slow it down or prevent it.
So one thing you can do is you can, to basically, if you start seeing it, is you can use baking soda or also sodium bicarbonate. Baking soda is a great thing for many things, and definitely in this situation. Now, you could combine it with some water, or you can combine it with like a cold pressed neem oil, or a liquid soap such as like a Dr. Bronner's liquid, or a mild dish soap.
What that does is that dish soap, everything you put in there allows it to stick on the plant leaf and eat away at that mildew. is what you're doing with these applications. There's a number of different home remedies that you can use on this. If you're going to go with a neem oil, you want a cold pressed neem oil. That's what you're wanting to look for. MIGardner.com has that available if you're looking for cold press. You just don't want to go to the big box store and buy neem oil, because they have taken all the goody stuff out of it, and really it's ineffective. So cold pressed neem oil if you're going to purchase neem oil for any gardening application there.
So you can use mouthwash, and you want to use the generic ethanol-based mouthwash, the stuff that is, you feel it when you use it in your mouth, that's for sure. And what that does is it helps eliminate, and if you're applying it, you water it down a little bit, but when you apply it, you don't want to apply it to the super new foliage. You want to apply it to the stuff that is more affected.
And that's typically the older leaves there. Now, in order to find this, all this information, you can go online and search for
Powdery Mildew and Growing a Greener World. And this article will come up that's written by our friend Joe Lample.
He's been a guest on the program. He's got a great article with that. So other things that we can do here in order to control, reduce, eliminate the powdery mildew, Holly, is, you got sulfur and lime sulfur. A direct contact sulfur prevents the disease spores from developing.
Vinegar. So some of the stuff you're going to have in your house anyway, like the baking soda, possibly the mouthwash, the vinegar. You may not have a neem oil, but you can make it effective, like we had mentioned, with the soap to add to the water. And then what else do we have? Oh, and the milk. We tried this.
And it didn't eliminate it, but it did slow it down enough to where the plant could finish out its lifespan before, and it was done by the time the frost hit. And now with this, if you have or you're seeing powdery mildew, you don't want to go, well, I'll get to it on Saturday or I'll get to it on Tuesday when I'm off, because by then the plant can be completely infected and coated with powdery mildew. It is not something that is slow to transfer from leaf to leaf. This can happen in a matter of hours with the infection of powdery mildew.
Right, and ironically, one of the suggestions here is water, and it's kind of like that fighting fire with fire type situation where you're using it to prevent those spores from continuing to form. This is something you would do early in the morning, get that water on there so the spores stop forming, so that the sun and the heat of the day can help dry it out. And
that's the thing. You want to disrupt those spores, break them apart, cover the leaf so you don't have any issues with that spore allowing that environment to exist for mold and mildew. Mildew is basically a form of mold, and that's what happens whenever you go and you don't do this correctly.
Right.
Other ways, powdery mildew, you can buy plants that are mildew resistant. Those exist. And you want to identify the type of mildew that you have, powdery mildew. There are some plants, some zucchini plants, that look like they have powdery mildew, but the actual structure of the plant leaf, that's the way it grows. That's the way it actually is. It has like light, whitish kind of areas on the leaf, so it's not powdery mildew. Some are just completely green as can be, and other ones have greenish spottiness, white areas. So know your plant and the variety in which you're growing so you don't misidentify that. Let's see what else. That's pretty much, we've covered pretty much everything we can cover. And again, if you're not certain that you have powdery mildew, and we're talking about vegetables here, you can do a image search.
Right. One thing I want to mention real quick, if you're going to use the vinegar or the mouthwash or anything that's possibly acidic, is you want to be very careful when you use it, because if you get that on your soil, obviously you're not going to spray a ton on your soil, but if you spill a lot or something, it can be harmful to the microbial life in your soil. So keep that in mind when you're spraying it or whatever. Just don't overdo it. But definitely, if you're going to mix it up in a part of your garden that you don't, where the soil doesn't really matter to you.
And a lot of times it's not the cause that you're doing to the plant, but sometimes it is. And again, watering in the evening can make a difference with that water on the leaves and not being able to cool or dry out. Now, if you're on a drip irrigation system, that's a totally different deal. If you're in the Milwaukee or surrounding areas, just tune your radio to 860 AM or FM 106.5. You can also find links on our Facebook pages, The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener and Home Canning. Our website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, click on the radio tab at the top of the page, then click on the Listen Live button, and you'll have immediately access to our live program. Mobile devices work very well also. Go to your app store and download for free the TuneIn app or the Simple Radio app. Then search WNOV 860, save it to your favorites, and you can have access to our radio show live wherever you're at in the world. Our radio program will also have podcast replay under the radio tab several days following the live broadcast. You can find all of these links in the show notes below. Our show airs 9 to 10 a.m. Central Standard Time every Saturday, March through the end of October. And we want to thank our sponsors because without them, this would not be anywhere possible. You can find all of their links under the radio tab on our website at thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.